Hello everybody, my name's Scott Maier, host of Drawing Together with Artists Network, and in this video you'll see me draw Michelangelo's David. Now this is an edited version of our weekly live stream Drawing Together, where we meet every Wednesday, 3 p.m. Eastern to draw together. There's a new subject each week, a new challenge, people from around the world, we get together to draw and improve our skills each week. And this video here, what you're going to see is me talking through some of the strategies that I use, some of the techniques that I employ, and you're going to really see me struggle through this drawing because that's so much about what the drawing process is. Trying to figure out what we're doing, right? So we're going to make a mess on the page. You're going to see me make a lot of mistakes and try to correct them and work through them, and hopefully you'll find that valuable. In the end, I think it turned out okay. There's definitely some room for improvement, but I think we also learned a lot about how to control proportions, how to shade, how to deal with line work, and all of the fun things that go into drawing that make it so challenging and so fun. So if you like what you see and you want to join us for the next live event, be sure to subscribe to our channel, like this video. I'd love to hear your comments, your thoughts, observations, questions all about drawing, about this project. If you want to follow along, you can find the link to the reference image in the link in the description below. And you can also find a link to the show page on artistnetwork.com where you can share your work when you're done and join a community of artists from around the world. So enjoy. I hope you learned something new, and I look forward to seeing you at the next Drawing Together event. So in order to get me in that place, I'm going to start to sketch things out loosely. That H pencil's not really doing it, not showing up. So I'm just going to abandon that altogether. I'm going to go to the 5, be a little bit softer, and be a little bit more aggressive with the marks early on. Because this isn't going to be, for me, about a kind of a clean kind of reproduction of this form. This is going to be a bit more reactionary. I'm going to try to put myself in the mindset as though I were actually on location looking up at this statue. The thing that kind of stands out for me is the you know, just again, kind of the scale of it, this look that we're looking up at the figure. Now, I posted a photo credit for this, so if you're following along and you're looking for the reference, it's in the description below. Check out more photographs by this photographer. I think they did a fantastic job. But in order to get going, you know, I can feel myself kind of like already thinking about the musculature, the pose, the facial features, and that's a distraction for me. And so I am going to try to really kind of go back to my core process, which is that of trying to see this as an abstraction early on. Using this early stage and this kind of gestural approach to kind of get my head in the game, get information on the page. I need something on the page so then I can start to make specific calculations and adjustments. I can say, all right, this is too big, this is too short, too wide, narrow, etc. But I can make a declarative statement about that rather than making an observation that feels concrete in the mind, but I don't really have language for it. So sometimes being able to describe the structure, the object, whatever you're working on, can be helpful. Now, what you may be thinking at this point, if you've done any figure drawing, a common way to initiate a figure drawing is with a gesture, more of an armature as a gesture. Kind of what I call those is inside-out drawing. So you start with establishing the central axis and the pose. And that is a perfectly valid way of working, right? I think there's many ways that we can initiate a drawing. I think the common sentiment between any approach, though, is that it's laying a foundation, and then from that you need to continually adjust and kind of move around the subject, let it let it evolve on the page, let it evolve in your mind. And so at this point, it looks like just a hot mess. So we're going to go through the ugly duckling stage pretty early, I think, here. So that's been a term that I haven't used in a while, but that was a big thing early on in the series, is that we, or at least I find that my drawings will often go through what I call the ugly duckling stage, where it feels like everything is going to fall apart, that I'm not even close to making this thing look right. It's just a hot mess, and then there's this slight panic that says, uh-oh, am I going to be able to make this work? Is this going to come together? And I've learned over the years that when I have that feeling, to get excited about it and just ride through it. Because even if it does fall apart, it'll be a fun adventure, right? You're going to learn something along the way. And if you can approach those things, those moments with a bit of humor, kind of be kind to yourself, you'll find that often what may look like a disaster has a lot of kind of potential there. There's something that you can really boost your understanding of drawing from. So again, I start to get excited when I feel like things are just falling apart. So at this stage, I'm just looking at the small thumbnail on the screen in front of me. I am just trying to not think about the fact that the marks I'm making will at some point become lips or his head. I'm trying to simply say this is a shape, react to that shape, and let things start to form on the page. And so, that when I think about drawing, this is how I would start every drawing class, is having students consider the word draw and what that really means, because we utilize, we use that term in ways other than what we're doing here. We are drawing. We are drawing. That's an act. The active that we're doing, and the result of this action of drawing will be a drawing. So we're thinking about the relationship between drawing and the drawing, and how you might prioritize that. What is more on the front of your mind? Where do you want to lead this? Is it about the drawing? Is it about the experience of having made this drawing? And when we think about other ways we use that word draw, we often use it to describe the pulling out of things, or the kind of the attractive qualities. We draw water from a well, we draw blood from a vein, we draw a name from a hat. We do these things where it's about emerging. And I kind of try to keep that in the forefront of my mind while I'm working at that. I'm allowing the image to emerge. And I wanted to bring this up because that's the famous quote by Michelangelo, right? He's famous for saying the figure's there. Like, what he's actually doing is he's focusing on everything that's not the statue, right? It's there in this giant block. He's thinking about everything that he needs to remove in order for this to be the result, to be left over. And it's about releasing the figure from the confines of the stone. And I think about that when we're drawing as well. It's here somewhere. It's here somewhere. And in the action, it's emerging. And that image in our mind becomes clearer. The image on the page becomes clearer. All right, so I'm now at the stage of kind of correcting. The thing that I'm looking at now is really more angle sighting. And I'm using the side of the pencil a bit more because that encourages looser marks. It encourages me to not get absorbed in the details. And with the reference to the left, I'm looking at exactly what you're seeing. The screen in front of me shows me what you're seeing right now. So right below me is the small thumbnail of the reference, and I see the drawing next to it. So I'm going to spend more time looking at that now. And now this is the point at which I'm going to rely more on the indirect gaze. So what I mean by that is I might be looking at the reference image, but I'm putting my awareness on what's happening in my peripheral vision off to the side. And then when I'm looking at the drawing, I may be putting my awareness on the reference image. And so as I'm looking and trying to assess the angle here, for example, I'm locking my vision on this part of the drawing, but being aware of the movement of the pencil out of my periphery. And if you have a screen open and you have your drawing next to it, you can literally place your pencil on the angle that you're targeting and then transfer it from the digital image to your drawing, and that will give you a very direct correlation between those two. But the stage I'm at right now, again, is looking at the angles and starting to break down the figure, the gesture there. Now, while I'm doing that, I can start to make connections across the drawing, and that's also a very valuable tool. So you can use plumb lines, you can use horizontal guides. A plumb line is simply a horizontal line that you use as a guide to kind of see how the elements in your subject stack up. So if I'm looking here at this angle that represents the slope of his cheek, I can find the farthest point to the right. If I drop a line down here, I can see where it cuts through the emerging forms of the figure. And I can compare that to the reference and see, is this lining up generally where it should? If you need to double check that, you can close one eye, align the pencil with the reference, and really observe that vertical path from one key point through the figure. A horizontal guide works very similarly, but you measure horizontally. And then another thing that might be helpful for you is as you're looking at an angle, so say I'm looking at the angle, the slope of the shoulder here, you can see how it might extend and pass through that form. And in doing that, you can see what I've got here is starting to align. If I were to carry this straight through, it starts to align with that chin. When I compare that to the reference, it doesn't do that. Right? So it actually, this line here would end up over here. And now I can double check that, and I can realize that this slope is too great. Right, so then I can move that down, and I can extend this and see, all right, now it's passing through something that feels a little bit better. I can kind of double check the axis of the shoulders to make sure that that slope is generally right. And again, kind of sticking with that ugly duckling stage a little bit. We're going to slowly create structure and form. I think I do need to clean things up a little bit. So I'm going to do some negative or subtractive drawing here to help with that. So starting to look at some of these shapes as abstractions. And the key thing that I have to remind myself too is I need to be looking up at the screen. That's a more accurate depiction of my drawing than this one that's directly in front of me. Because I'm looking at it at this angle, my brain is already kind of correcting for some of the perspective distortion. And I look up at it vertically and I'm like, oh, that's very different than what I see here. So if you haven't done that already, throughout the drawing process, you might find benefit in just standing it up, setting it back and vertically, and then analyzing those proportions there. So at this point, I really haven't calculated any of the measurements of the figure, and I think I need to start doing that. So I'm kind of just going by feel, layering on the angle sighting, starting to visualize plumb lines, things like that. The big thing that I need to really understand, I think, is the neck here, and I just keep working in this area for some reason, and I'm gonna try to articulate why. I don't really know, and I guess that's part of the drawing process. I'm sure there's areas that you work on in your drawing, and there's no real, like, it's not a conscious thing. You just find yourself working in that area. But there's something here. I feel it may perhaps is simply because it's more central to the form. But I feel like I really have to get this right, and it feels like this is a bit too wide at this point. So I'm going to bring this in. So again, going by feeling, knowing that I cannot trust those feelings, and I will have to kind of double check them. Let's see. So the other thing that I want to do is kind of look at this negative space here. If that's a term that you're not really familiar with, really the positive space is the shape that the object you're observing makes as a form. In this case, the statue right here, that's the positive space. The negative space is the shape created in the voids around that. And so I'm kind of switching back and forth between observing the line as an edge of the head, and then simultaneously trying to observe the negative space. So if you're struggling with that, one of the things that can be helpful is to try to soften your focus a little bit. Let your eyes blur, let them lose focus, and that you're more inclined to take in the whole thing. That's really kind of the goal, is we're starting from trying to take in the whole thing, and we're gradually moving into focus here. And I know sometimes I see these master artists just hit it right out of the gate. They get the right proportions, they get the right line work, but they pull together this amazing drawing, seemingly effortless, but that hasn't been my experience for myself all the time. So hopefully, if this does become a mess and it fails miserably, that we'll walk away with with some sort of understanding of the drawing process that's a little bit deeper than when we started. So kind of what I'm doing now is you can start to see that I'm indicating some of these kind of finer elements in the neck. And they're not correct right now. My main objective with them is to simply give myself more information. I need more to work with. And so I need kind of key points that I can connect across the form. And in order to, this ultimately my goal is to place the nose, but I'm working on all this other stuff to help set the stage and help me bring this into kind of correct proportions a little bit more. Here I'm looking at, there's a slight indication of this center line right underneath the chin. I'm feeling good about that. I'm going to find the slope of the axis here. Imagine a line running through the center of the chin and the lips here. Kind of a line running down the nose, up the length of the nose there. I got to move my hand out of the way. There we go. That's generally pretty good. So I'm kind of looking for that central axis to help with the placement of some of these forms. And then what I want to do is really kind of locate this shape, the underside of the nose. And it's a bit of a hard edge right now, and we'll go through and manipulate that, soften that a bit. And this is one of those wild things that I have a hard time really kind of wrapping my head around. As I look here, I see the side of the nose, and then I see the cheekbone that is, literally above the nose, but from this perspective, optically, it actually intersects there. So we're going to spend a lot of time, I think, on the head. And then I'm going to periodically take a break and start to indicate something here in the rest of the figure. So trying to find here, we have the clavicle there. Especially you could see that tendon in the neck. That's very visible the way the light's catching it. And try to find that angle. Of course, what's really kind of significant about the pose is the contrapposto, the kind of the tilting of the shoulders and the twist in the torso that makes this so distinctive. And then this right over here, so that hand is going to have to move entirely. Let me get rid of that. So this is, hopefully we're going to show what it means to really fight through a drawing. Right? All right, so, and in this abstract shape, I'm starting to understand the form a little bit better. Just kind of comparing it to the reference. If I blur my vision, hopefully the drawing, it looks similar. There's a correlation between what I see when I blur my vision and what I see on the page. And eventually I'll be you working from the larger scale reference here on my left. So right now, one of the other things that I want to raise right now is that working on this toned paper, my brain is calibrating to the values that I see in front of me. So now I'm seeing this that I just lifted off as kind of a lighter value than it might actually be. Okay, I need to do kind of a quick check-in. I'm going to use the nose kind of as a point of reference. So, and through all of this process, there is kind of a bit of intuition, playing a role in this, in that I'm responding to these forms based on what I feel like I need to do next. I'm going to try to articulate when I'm making a calculated decision to see if it benefits you at all. But hopefully this isn't too scattered for you, because especially for this, it is a bit of a fight to try to figure this out. And I find myself kind of darting all over the place. There's a bit of lack of focus happening. And I'm going to own that as part of the process. Okay. So what is standing out for me right now is that I feel like the head is tilted toward me. I'm looking, I'm not getting that sense of perspective out of this. Everything feels like it's coming up forward. So I need to reassess something. And I think what I need to reassess is this distance here. So if I place the nose there and I measure down to, say, this part at the jaw line, and I compare that to the vertical distance there, let me pull up the larger. Perhaps it's close. Just trying to compare the two. This is so bright right now, it's distracting. So what I'm going to try to do is really understand this, again, abstractly as much as possible. Okay, so back to the proportions. This is kind of the downside, I think, to the approach that I have to drawing. So starting with these shapes, whereas another approach would be to kind of really build an armature for the head. In that, now I've got these shapes and I need to adjust them and work them, but I don't really have an underlying structure. So what I'm going to do is kind of go back to that now and start to work out kind of in a linear way. Try to observe the structure of the head a little bit more. So I've got my central axis kind of worked out and I'm feeling pretty good about it. But there's something in the kind of the tilt to the head that is not really working out. And so what I'm going to do is I'm kind of mapping this line. This line here will be softer, but I want to first map it, and I feel like I keep getting it right, but it's not appearing that way. Maybe I think what I also need to do is bring up some of this shape here. I think a lot of it is really this shape in here, the shadow on the underside of the chin. We'll see if we can figure this out. But again, this is kind of part of, this is figure drawing. This is why it's really helpful to work with the figure, because it's in the problem solving where you find a lot of growth. And the human form is it's so complex that that there's so many opportunities to learn about edges and about form, about gesture. So as I look at this now, it's feeling like it's capturing that gesture a little bit more effectively. So one of the things that could have been more helpful for me early on was to try to identify that gesture, find those central axis, the axis for each of these forms, and really build out from there. Because I didn't start with that, though, you can always come back to it. Sticking to my general inclination to start with major shapes and then find the form out of that. You still can apply an awareness of those central axis and of that gesture. And again, it goes back to what I was saying earlier, that we learn all of these tools as artists, but we're going to find our own ways of navigating the process, applying those techniques, applying those skills in a way that makes sense to us. That process that we develop as artists starts to become part of your identity as an artist. So I think this is where I need to really focus on, is the kind of proportions in the head here. And I feel like I'm kind of overstating his hair a bit. It's such awesome hair that I need to feel like what I've done is kind of exaggerated it a little bit, but. So what I'm trying to do is, again, now I'm stepping back, trying to think about these as abstract shapes. So when I'm looking at the hair area, I'm just looking at that shape of light that's coming out. Where is it relative to this shape here? Shape the eraser a little bit. And then I think that's going to play a key role in expressing the tilt of the head, is getting that relationship between the shape here of the chin that we're really looking up underneath and then the shape of the hair. You know, so if we were to kind of raise up and be level with the head, those proportions would shift significantly. I'm going to actually shift back to this H pencil. It's a little bit harder, and I abandoned it earlier because it was not very visible. And I think that will actually work to my advantage now. And so what I'm doing right now is I'm trying to kind of express the shape of the lips. And this is where my head's at right now with regards to drawing kind of a portrait, essentially, is there's this movement back and forth, this oscillation between looking at the features and then looking at the spaces between them. And it's so easy to get locked into drawing the lips, drawing the nose, but when you shift to thinking about the structure between them, it can help sometimes really lock into the correct form. So what I think I had done, you know, of course I've indicated the nose here, but it's when I think about just the structure of the nose in isolation, it's taking my attention away from making sure that they're placed correctly, if that makes sense. So using this eraser, I'm kind of extracting a little bit more, cutting back into it, kind of trying to refine the shape. And then from a linear viewpoint, the value in figure drawing like this is in really understanding the subtle interactions between these curves. So we captured the overall shape of the nose, but when you look at that general angle more specifically, you realize that there's just this beautiful kind of undulation there. There's this interlocking between these curves that expresses the forms. And you learn so much about drawing by kind of shifting into that mode of thinking. There's kind of a hardness to the edge of that nostril on the inside. Gets a little bit softer in here. So I'm going to this kind of lighter material on purpose so I can kind of sneak up on the forms a bit more. Here. So as I'm, you see I keep working this shape here. I'm making it too big and then I cut it back and then I make it too big again and cut it back. And sometimes you just have to call it and say I'm done with this, but sometimes you just keep doing that. It's like sometimes it feels like we're just drawing in sand, moving these shapes around. And then, of course, we're going to be bringing out the highlights on this, so I'm trying to be aware of these areas where there's going to be lighter values interacting with some of these darker forms to help bring out more of that form. And then with these lips, they're really interesting in looking at that structure. So if you look at this upper lip, for example, as we kind of tuck into that corner of the mouth, we see this kind of diffused shadow shape. And then we see this upper lip turning into shadow here, and it kind of has a sharper edge. And then it starts to catch the light right in here a little bit. And as we come down under here now, we can observe the changing structure of light and shadow. We see this thin sliver of light here catching on the edge of the lip. And then it kind of falls into this shadow shape. And then there's this light here. Actually, I'm going to use this eraser here to sharpen that up a little bit. And then, so now I've kind of reworked this shadow shape here a little bit to accommodate the shape that I'm seeing around the mouth. But again, hopefully what this is kind of showing is how to struggle. Because this has not been easy. I talked about that earlier, that sense of panic at that ugly duckling stage, where you're like, is this going to come together? I have no idea. We'll see. And I'm doing it live. So we'll see how it ultimately turns out. I feel like what I've done is I've made the facial features too big. And this is I notice a big difference. So right now what I can see is I see this large reference image here. I see the little one right there. And when I look at the large one, it feels like that's what I'm looking at here. When I compare it to the small one, I feel like the nose is way too big. And perhaps it is. But that's kind of the nature of what we talked about earlier about the idea that the drawing process can reveal so much about the way your mind processes information. And I learned so much about my own my own kind of visual biases, I suppose. The things that I kind of interpret incorrectly so easily. And I think what I had done is I had drawn the nose too large. And it's really hard, because it's so small, to determine the correct proportions. Let's see. So let's see, if I take the tip of the nose to that furrow in the brow, that gives me a measurement. And so that distance from the tip of the nose to the brow is about the same as from the tip of the nose down to the corner of the mouth. So that's about right. And I feel like I'm getting a little bit closer. I feel like what I've done is I've drawn the mouth too big, that upper lip. And now we can adjust that, just slight changes. So when I'm erasing, I'm kind of aware that I'm gonna remove a larger chunk than I really need. But then I can cut back into it with my pencil. And then kind of double checking. Now I'm looking at, again, both the big one and then the small one in front of me. But I'm feeling better about kind of that look now. I think shrinking the nose seems to have been something of value. So now kind of just working through the hand. As I'm doing that, I think one of the things that's valuable is being able to kind of check back and forth. So as I'm working my way down the hand, doing quick check-ins. Where am I relative to other landmarks in the image here? So as I work down, I'm working on the wrist now, doing a quick check-in to see where am I at relative to other features. And I'm going to try to indicate that as much as I can as I go through this. So that, did I get that hand right? Let's see. So the hand, the width of the hand is about the same as the width of really the jawline. So I feel like I've made that hand perhaps a little bit too large. So if I take that, I take that, with that distance here from the length of the jaw should equal the length from this knuckle to the wrist. So that means that wrist really comes in way over here. And so that's the kind of the value in being able to step back a little bit in the drawing. So if we stay focused, if I had stayed focused on that hand and just really focus on the shape, that comes at the expense of understanding the overall form and the totality of the scene. There's a loss in that when I come into focus, and that's what you saw me do right there. I was working on the shape. And as I'm thinking about those forms, I'm thinking, yeah, I got the shape of that knuckle just right. Really liking the shape of the back of the hand. I'm feeling really confident about that. But then when I step back, I realize, oh, wow, all of that focus and those good feelings about the shape came at the expense of understanding how the shape of the hand, the scale of the hand relates to the head. And that is huge, right? And so take time to really always be stepping back. Let's see, the width here. Yeah, this is something I think I made that hand too large. How do I fix that? Okay. So now the downside to this whole process is that, I I kind of loosely mapped out the form. Right? You saw me create the gesture, and I had everything accounted for. Then I got locked in on drawing the head, and now it's not all going to fit. So I need to then, now I'm confronted with two options. I can either redo everything here and shrink it down, or I can just let it go. And I'm just going to let it go because we're coming up on 2 hours and I don't have time to fix it. But hopefully what that does is it kind of shows you the value in that initial gesture and focusing on those fundamental proportions. And I think typically that's something that I spend more time doing. But I ignored that a little bit. So what I need to do is actually make this a little bit larger. This shoulder comes out a little bit more. I need to adjust the scale of the hands and go from there. So you saw a really fundamental mistake play out over the last hour and 45 minutes. But that's why we do this, right? That's why we challenge ourselves. This isn't about making a perfect drawing. It's about having a drawing experience that in some way advances my skills, all right? So I've got now this experience of messing up in front of you all, and that teaches me something about this process that I had known, but that's what practice is all about, right? There's so many things to think about when you're drawing, so many things to prioritize. But we can't, we can kind of expect perfection, but we can aim for it. And to me, the value, what I'm trying to perfect is a process. Is a mindset about drawing. I'm going to try to think through the shape of the torso. There's really that tilt so that you can see the pectoral muscles very clearly. But we're also looking, or kind of glancing across them. And so that actually shortens it. I have a feeling, my instinct is to make them bigger, taller than I can actually see. I'm using the light to my advantage a little bit, trying to indicate the light that falls on here to help highlight the form a bit. And we're going to be bringing out the white charcoal in just a bit. So what I'm doing now is I'm going to try to sculpt with the eraser a little bit. I'm trying to be thinking about the form, the way the light falls on the form, the way the form wraps around, has this volumetric expression. But I do want to kind of capture that, the way the light is falling on this arm a little bit more. So what I'm looking at is that thin sliver of light there. Let's see if I can loosely indicate it. Try to understand the structure of that hand, that twist to the arm. One of the things that figure drawing, I think, it can also do is, because the figure is such a complex form, you can learn a lot about the direction of marks and how valuable that can be. So what I'm looking at are the cross-contour information. So if that's not a term you're familiar with, when I'm talking about contour, I'm talking about lines that represent the outer edge of an object. But then there's also cross-contour information. There's marks within the outer edges that indicate its three-dimensional structure as well. And so we think about here, for example, the way that hand really is more cylindrical than my initial impression. There's this quality of these lines that really wrap around there. And so I'm using that to help direct the direction of my marks. I'm going to go through here and take note of where the highlights are. I'm going to start up here. And I don't know as if there's a particular reason. I just feel like starting here. So I know there's going to be a highlight here along the nose. And so generally the brightest highlights are going to happen at the turns, right, where there's the bridge of the nose, there's a sharp front, and then it turns down the side. And where that turn is happening is where the strongest highlight is going to be. And then right in here, there's another turn that's catching the light a little bit more. And now, so there are kind of two ways to think about hatching as you're shading or you're building up these areas of value, in this case adding the white. There's dimensional hatching, so kind of following along the cross contour. And then there's parallel hatching. So there's the idea that you see this a lot in Leonardo's work, building up layers of your marks that are all moving parallel to one another, but it may be different than the actual direction or the plane of the surface there, the cross contour. And I often do kind of a hybrid of that. I'll kind of do a combination of the two. So if I'm thinking here, there's an angle, there's a slope to that cheekbone, so I might try to direct my marks to support that. Or maybe I'll create kind of a wash. I'll do a whole kind of flood of value to lighten up a whole area by moving marks in one direction. And there's what I'm trying to pay attention to are where the edges are the sharpest, and trying to bring clarity to those forms. And what I'm noticing is that the graphite is inhibiting the ability for the white charcoal to kind of stick to the page. So it's just a little bit harder for it to stick to the page with a layer of graphite. So I'll lift it with the eraser first, and then drop in some of those highlights. And I'm making kind of little notes, moving around to another spot, making other notes. Moving, just keep kind of building up these areas of light. And then if you're very light with the touch, you can use the white charcoal to sharpen up an area without it competing. So like right in this area, if I'm just trying to sharpen up that edge, I can just do a light touch on that area, and it'll kind of crisp up that edge without kind of popping off. I don't want this side to come forward. This is the area the lightest light, and that's what helps make that understandable more as a three-dimensional form, because this light area advances more. And right in there, I was trying to lay in some of the white, but it's not sticking because of the graphite underneath it. But if we let them mix a little bit, it can do some fun things. Drop in some light for the hair there. So I'm just capturing a little bit of light there to hopefully kind of express the turn in the body, the lifting of the chest. Leaving this area open a little bit to kind of express that shadow being cast by the sling there. Oh, and then I do want to get a little bit of light there, and then light here down that hand. I don't think I'm going to go any farther than that, just to keep the focal point up here. Keep things a little bit loose. I'm too close to this right now. I need to go clear my head. I'll come back tomorrow and look at this, and it'll look very different. But that's the nature of all art. There's so many times when I've done a painting or a drawing, been really happy with it, set it up, and I realized that there are just some major issues, and it's very humbling. But at the same time, there's some times that I'll do work on a painting or a drawing, and I'll just be fighting against it. I'll think it's horrible. But I try to be kind to myself, come back to the next day and realize, oh, there's more here than I might have given myself credit for in the beginning. So I hope that's the case with you as well. I hope you're happy with your drawing, not just the drawing, but with the whole drawing experience, because that's what this is all about. All right, thank you all. I look forward to meeting you next week. Again, we're working on that drawing over there, the fabric. It's a little small right now, but that's what we'll be working on for next week. I will try to put on the list more of these master copy type drawings. Have a great week. Thank you again. Thank you for Leslie and Dita for helping me with the challenging chat experience. And thank you for sticking with me through that. All right, have a great week.